Good morning. We are going to begin the lessons on Vedas. Vedas, as we have gone through some of the classes, they are the ancient scriptures on which it is based. The major division of Indian philosophy is based on the Vedas. The acceptance of Vedas as the source. Those systems which accept the authority of Vedas, they are considered orthodox system. Those which do not accept the authority of Vedas, they are considered as unorthodox or heterodox or Nastika system. And those which accept, they are called Astika systems. So we have the two major divisions. Now we want to consider what is this Vedas, the origin, who wrote it, and these are the details which we are going to deal with. So first we go to what is the importance of Vedas, why they are so important. Since this Veda is of time immemorial, exact time of Veda is not ascertained. All what we have is from certain time it was collected or into the written form. So the existence of Vedas, it is much beyond that. It is going much beyond. What we have, how the Vedas are come about. The Vedas are considered the earliest literary record of Indo-Aryan civilization and the most sacred book of India. They are the original scriptures of Hindu teachings containing spiritual knowledge encompassing all aspects of life. So the Vedas are said to be the very source. And then the philosophical maxims of Vedic literature have stood the test of time, and Vedas form highest religious authority for all aspects of Hinduism and are respected source of wisdom for mankind in general. So what is this source? What is the importance that it is going to envelop the entire existence of human being, the knowledge realm, and in the very existence and the different aspects of human existence. So these Vedas have stood the test of time, and Vedas form the highest religious authority for all aspects of Hinduism. The word Veda means wisdom, knowledge, or vision, and it serves to manifest the language of gods in human speech. So what the Vedas, what we have, that's in the written form, which was composed in hymns, which was first orally transmitted to the disciples, and it was by the sages or the rishis who sat in meditation. It was revealed to them, and they composed their experience of God into hymns. And these hymns were sung for many, maybe centuries in the oral tradition. So from Guru to the disciples, and from the disciples to their disciples, to went on for a long time till it came to the stage of writing down, because meanwhile so many centuries have passed and lot of these hymns which were composed, they were lost. Exactly as it was transmitted by the Guru to the disciples, perhaps that was not very faithfully followed on. The sense, certain aspects were forgotten, or not able to recite or recollect all of them, and therefore slowly got lost. Once the script was found, they understood the need of putting them down in black and white. So from that moment onwards, we have the preservation of the hymns. And then it took a little more time for the codification of these hymns into different, as we have the 4 Vedas, the main ones. So which hymns belonging to which Veda, so that a certain rule was applied, and all the hymns were divided into, or according to the rule or the format they applied, they separated them into and categorized them and put into these 4 Vedas. So that's how the codification took place. Before the codification, what we have is only the oral tradition and the transmission, and most of the literature that was already lost, we can see. So Vedas in itself, that word means knowledge or vision, wisdom, and this, it serves to manifest the language of God into human speech. So what we hear is human speech, the human thought. But considering the time, at that time there was no big chance for them to know these details, the sense of the modern ways of knowing, it was not existing. So when we compare our time and the time the Vedas were composed, there is a big gap of a generation gap is there, a huge gap. But we wonder, how could they get so much of knowledge at that time when it was in the primitive stage? So the knowledge about the self, about God and the human existence, and so many things, the questions which they were seeking for an answer, and they were able to get that. So how did they get? Was it possible for human intellect to have all that? So when we, from this century, the 21st century, when we look back and see how could they get such a knowledge or get hold of so much of knowledge about the self, the developed. And what we have now, we can see that with a lot of modern equipment, modern research and all that, we are able to ascertain the veracity of such things. But those who were existing at that time, without any of those help, they had a knowledge of that unknown. So that's what makes us really wonder, how could they get hold? And therefore, it is given to the fact that it was really inspired texts which they were able to compose into hymns. So their experience, or what they knew, the rishis and those acharyas and the sannyasins who went in deep meditation, they began to get a feel of that, and which was composed into hymns. And therefore, it is a human speech but inspired. It's a divine experience which was given in the human speech. The laws of Vedas have regulated social, legal, domestic and religious customs of Hindus up to the present day. So how did Vedas get influenced? They have influenced practically the entire life of human persons. That is in the societal or the social level, religious level, then the different customs or domestic matters, legal matters. All the obligatory duties of Hindus at birth, marriage, death, etc. are guided by the Vedic rituals. So there are special rituals for every important occasions. So that also is prescribed there. What type of rituals to be performed at birth, then at the marriage or different occasions, then death time, and then any important occasions. So there are so much details are given with regard to the rituals. So a person who had already a deeper insight into human existence, they have also given into. So therefore, to think so much in a distant, in the sense a foreknowledge of things, what would be happening, and perhaps this the same similar situation is continuing for the human race. There is not much change. Man as such, his needs, his desires and all the things, that continues to be more or less the same. But then the advancement which people have made in the course of time, that is tremendous, the scientific way, scientific level. So applying these rules to what we had been given, then we are trying to find out where and how did these things originate? Or how could they come to such height of knowledge, which we ourselves find it very difficult in the modern era, and how without any of such aid they have been able to acquire? So that makes us really wonder whether it is only the human innovation or it is really inspired text. So we come to a conclusion that it is human speech, but about the divine, the experience of the divine. So Vedas are those texts which is divinely inspired and put it in the human form or human language. The next question perhaps we ask is, how did they originate? The origin of Vedas. It is difficult to say when the earliest portions of the Vedas came into existence, but it seems clear that they are among the very earliest written documents and that's produced by humans, as the ancient Hindus seldom kept any historical record of their religious, literary, or political realization. It is difficult to determine the period of Vedas with precision. Why it becomes difficult? So for Indians, we had no culture of preserving the history or the important events that would happen. So that was not so much in our system. And therefore, exactly to point out what is the origin, when is the origin of Vedas, it's very difficult, because we have no document to support, that is the important, the historical record of the religious, literary, or political realization, some achievement which the human beings have made. There is no proper document for that. Therefore, exactly to say this and this year or this time it has happened, that we don't have. And therefore, we have only the probable dates of the origin. So historians provide us with many guesses, but none of them are guaranteed to be precise. It is thought, though, the earliest Vedas may date back roughly to 1700 BCE, the late Bronze Age. So that could be more or less the time we can say that the origin of Vedas, 1700 BC. From there we go to who is the author of Vedas. That would be the question. The time of Vedas, more or less we can say that 1700 BCE. And then who is the author? Tradition has it that humans did not compose the revered composition of the Vedas, but that God taught the Vedic hymns to the sages, who then handed them down through generations by word of mouth. Humanly speaking, it was impossible for any human endeavor to have such depth of realization at that time. It means the composition of these hymns. When we look back, it is or near to an impossibility that humans would have such a capacity to grasp the unknown. And therefore, tradition has it that humans did not compose the revered compositions of the Vedas. Vedas are in the form, or there's a more of the hymn, composed in the hymns, and different hymns are segregated or applied a certain format or principle, and accordingly those which falls into certain category, they were categorized and put into 4 types of Vedas. So thus we have the Chatur Veda, 4 Vedas we have. And this classification has taken much later. So at the beginning of this composition, number of hymns were composed without any particularity. So as they felt like, they began to sing or teach to their disciples. And it is said, the tradition says that it is not really composed by the human endeavor, but it is taught God taught the Vedic hymns to the sages, who then handed over to through the generations by word of mouth. So that was an oral tradition which had been there existing for a long. The only means of the transmission. No paper was found that time, no script was found. So all what was there was only the oral tradition. So oral transmission from the guru or the sages to the disciples or his companions. Another tradition suggests that the hymns were revealed to the sages who were known as seers or seers. The formal documentation of Vedas was done mainly by Vyasa Krishna Dvaipayana around the time of Lord Krishna, 1500 BC. So 1700 BC is the composition of Vedas, and then 1500 BC would be the real, that is the codification mainly done. The documentation was done by Vyasa Krishna Dvaipayana around the time of Lord Krishna, 1500 BC. So these are the probable dates, not exactly because we don't have any clear documentation of that. And therefore, ascertaining from certain proofs of this time, we are able to more or less come to a conclusion that the time of Vedas could be 1700 BCE, and the documentation of this, the first documentation done by Vyasa Krishna Dvaipayana around 1500 BC. So that is the two probable dates with regard to when Vedas are composed and when or who wrote the Vedas as such. So these are the two things which we have. Then we come to the classification of Vedas. So we have said that Vedas are forming a very important text or an authority on which the entire philosophical system exists, especially the Indian philosophy. So basing or accepting the authority of Vedas or not accepting. So Vedas are said to be the ancient texts that are available. Now we are going little deeper into where did they come from, what time is the composition of the Vedas, who wrote them, and we come to a more or less a conclusion that it is composed with the help of the human beings, in the sense not on their own, but inspired, or gods taught the hymns to the sages and they have transmitted it. Because looking back to that time, whether the human intellect has grown so much as of now, it's questionable. So we, with a lot of modern research and the documentation and scientific proofs, we ascertain more or less a date for the composition of these. And also we can say we have the limitation that there was no proper documentation of the historical events in the beginning. Therefore, we don't have anything in black and white. So all the Vedas which were in the oral tradition, we do not know when they have begun, because there is no document for that. All what we have is from the moment when they were really documented, maybe the written form, some type of documentation. So that is the only source, and that would be we ascertain a age, time that 1700 BCE for the composition of Vedas, the beginning of Vedas, and 1500 BC as the real documentation on that. So let us come to the classification of Vedas. The Vedas are classified into 4 volumes. That is the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Yajurveda and Atharva Veda. So we have 4 big divisions here, or into 4 Vedas or Chaturvedas. So Vedas are classified into 4 volumes: Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda and Atharva Veda. With the Rig Veda serving as the principal text. So for all the 4 Vedas, Rig Veda becomes the principal text. The 4 Vedas collectively known as Chatur Veda. So Vedas are 4, and that is Yajurveda, that is Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, Atharva Veda, of which the first 3 Vedas, Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, agree with one another in form, language and content. So there seems to be a lot of similarity between the first 3 Vedas. That is Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda. Only Atharva Veda is slightly different. So we have the classification. And how are these classified? So that is much later the classification has happened. So how did the classification take place? They collected all the hymns that could be collected and they were written down, whatever was written down, all these were collected. And certain codification was done. Certain rules applied as per the standard, and accordingly they have classified all the hymns into 4 groups. And these 4 groups, what we have today is the Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, Atharva Veda. So in all these 4 Vedas, we have certain elements that are going to be common in them. And Rig Veda being the principal text for all the 4 Vedas. Now the structure of the Vedas, we have the classification classified into 4 Vedas. And each of these Vedas, how it is structured. That means Rig Veda, it has got a structure. Samaveda, a structure. So what is that structure of the Vedas? What are that making the Vedas? Yajurveda, what is it composed of? So the composition of Vedas. Each Vedas consists of 4 parts. So we have 4 Vedas, or all the hymns are classified into 4. And therefore we have 4 Vedas, Chatur Veda, and each Veda has got 4 parts. And what are they? Samhitas, they are the hymns. Brahmanas, that are the rituals. Then Aranyakas, theologies, and Upanishad, philosophy. So each Veda has got 4 parts. We have 4 Vedas, and each of these Vedas will have a distinct parts, 4 distinct parts, and they are the Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads. They are the hymns. Samhitas are the hymns, Brahmanas are the rituals, Aranyakas the theology, and Upanishad the philosophy. So these 4 parts make one Veda. So in Rig Veda, when we take Rig Veda, has got the Samhitas, the hymns are there. Then the rituals, the Brahmanas are there, rituals are there. Aranyakas, theology, and Upanishad, philosophy. So these 4 parts are in each Vedas. So in 4 Vedas, each Veda has got these 4 parts. And these 4 parts are, that is of the Samhitas, that is the hymns, Brahmanas, rituals, then Aranyakas, that is the theology, and the Upanishads, the philosophy.